Hi, welcome to another video for General Science. In this video, we're going to be discussing energy resources. So here's some of the vocabulary that we're going to look at. You might want to pause the video at this point so you can make sure and take note of each of these terms. Each of these terms you should know, you should understand and know by the end of the video. Be able to give me a short little paragraph on each and discuss it. Here are the key concepts. There's two main questions that we're going to cover. What are the major non-renewable and renewable sources of energy? And how can energy resources be conserved? So non-renewable energy resources, okay, so they exist in limited quantities. They cannot be replaced. Or they can be, but it takes an enormous amount of time to regenerate those resources. And they come in the form of oil, natural gas, coal, and uranium. Okay, so here are some examples of coal or oil. Okay, natural gas. So these are called fossil fuels, meaning that these resources come from the fossilization or for the decomposition, the degradation of live material, organic matter. So something that was at one point alive, it died, it was buried underneath the ground, and over time and pressure, and with pressure, these fossil fuels were formed, and now we use them and we extract the energy from them by gas and what have you. Okay, so about 60% of the fossil fuels are located in a small area in the Middle East. Only about 2% of the oil is found in the United States. Okay, now there are other forms in which that we've developed to extract oil from the soil, for example. And there's also something called fracking, which is basically extracting gas, natural gas from the ground as well. Now, these processes have caused some issues, like earthquakes, for example. Okay, because when you take out these gases or these oils, it leaves a vacuum pretty much. It leaves an empty space where ground can collapse and cause earthquakes, shifts in the soil, and even some massive holes in the ground too. This is just some of the examples of some of the other ways that we harness energy. Um, Now, it's been said that we once thought that cars were the #1 cause of pollution, but as it turns out, it's the methane gas produced from our cow farms that produce the most pollution. And this is just an aerial view of that pollution, some of that pollution, the chemical pollution that's created. It's that green sludge, and it also comes in red as well if green isn't enough. And of course, it produces a lot of smog because you got to keep in mind when you're talking about the conservation of energy or conservation of mass, you have to consider the fact that these fossil fuels, this organic matter, was in the form of an oil, and then you refine it, you turn it into gas and other fuels. That when these fuels get burned up, all of that carbon matter that was once in the form of oil is now turned into a form, when it's burned up, it's turned into a gaseous form, which we see as smog. Okay, so all that carbon has to go somewhere, and it typically goes into our air, and it pollutes our cities. Now, there are renewable resources that can be replaced. Most renewables originate directly or indirectly from the sun, as we'll see. The Earth and the sun release an enormous amount of energy, free natural energy. Okay, now these energies, these forms of energy, these renewable resources don't come without a cost, because even when you consider hydroelectric plants, okay, your water dams, even these when they're built, they actually create another ecological issue for animal life downstream. Okay, so they may not cause as much pollution, but they do cause ecological issues down the line. And then you have a less problematic source of renewable energy, which is solar power. Okay, so much like the plants, we've developed technology that can harness the energy from sun, photons. Okay, we can harness that energy and turn it into electrical energy. Also, we can harness the heat, thermal energy, geothermal energy, heat from that's generated at the core of our Earth. We can use that heat to produce electricity, and that comes processed by allowing that heat to basically steam water, which turns a generator to produce electricity. Okay, and in a similar fashion, you can use water. You can use the current of water to produce electricity. You can use geothermal, or you can also use the current, air current, wind current. Okay, so these wind currents will turn these massive propellers. Okay, there are football fields in length. They turn these massive propellers and they generate electricity also. And then we also have biomass. Biomass produces electricity by consuming or combusting these materials, and then that heat that's generated from this material can then also turn a generator to produce electricity. Now I keep mentioning a generator. I'll make a separate video highlighting in detail, or at least we'll discuss it in class. I'll show you a diagram of how these generators produce electricity. Okay, because as it turns out, all you really need is a magnet and something like copper wire, and to produce electricity. It's very simple. Okay, so conservation of energy resources. This is the final topic. As you can see here, you know, as the population on the planet becomes more developed, more people are going to want to have their cars, their apartments that use electricity and produce a lot of carbon emissions. So we have to find ways to conserve our resources, and that could be via mass transit, or getting a bike and using your leg power instead of horsepower. Okay. Also, we can develop new technologies like the Tesla. Okay, these electric cars use very little or produce very little carbon emissions. But the problem with these technologies is that although they exist and they're great, they're also very expensive. Because a car like this would cost, a Tesla Model S runs about $70,000 to $90,000, and your average person can't afford a Tesla. Also, I understand also not too long ago, as of me making this video in December of 2016, about a month ago, I was reading an article of how the same company that produces Tesla can now produce roof tiles that are solar. So now the interesting thing about this is when you see their presentation, they leave out the price. So as I mentioned before, these technologies that they're being produced, as cool as they are, there is a hefty price tag. We haven't figured out a way to make them cheaply yet. So that does it for energy resources. I hope this helped. Good luck in your studying.